Okay, so today we're going to take a deep dive into something a little different.
Yeah, definitely a bit of a departure from our usual.
Yeah, right. I mean,
Yeah,
usually we're digging into some pretty dense research papers or, news articles or even books, but
right, exactly. But this time around, we're tackling a YouTube animation.
that's right. It's called Delirium, and it's from a channel called Rainrose Media.
And it's flash fiction, so we're talking short but powerful storytelling.
Exactly. And, even though it's short and animated, it still manages to pack a punch, dealing with some pretty heavy themes like childhood trauma.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And even within that darkness, it kind of hints at a way forward, like a possibility of finding some inspiration or hope.
Exactly. So our mission today is to break this animation down, really look at what makes it tick, and, see what we can learn from it.
Yeah, what kind of insights it might offer about our own experiences and how we deal with our own inner struggles.
Right, because even though it's, a fictional story in this animated format, it still taps into something very real and universal.
Absolutely. So let's jump right in.
All right, so the animation opens with this really striking image. It's a city, but it's like a post-civilization city.
Yeah, you get this immediate sense of decay, like everything's crumbling and overgrown.
Right, and what really stood out to me was the silence, like this heavy, oppressive silence.
Yeah, it's like the whole world just went quiet and you're left with this eerie stillness.
Exactly, and that contrast, between what you can imagine the city was like before, all bustling and full of life.
Right. And now it's just this empty shell. It's like a ghost town almost.
It really makes you think about, how fragile everything is, civilization, society, even our own lives.
Oh, definitely. It's a sobering thought for sure. And it's against this backdrop that we meet our main character, Jenny.
Right, she's alone in this dimly lit apartment, and the animation really emphasizes her isolation.
Yeah, you can tell she's been through a lot. She's carrying some heavy burdens.
Right, like she's worn down by some internal struggle, and that visual language, the dim lighting, the sense of decay outside.
It all mirrors what's going on inside of her. Like her inner world is just as broken as the environment around her.
Right, and that's where the story takes this really interesting turn, because into this silence, this isolation, comes a knock at the door.
And that's when everything changes, right?
Yeah, out of nowhere, this young girl appears, and it's like this tear in the fabric of reality.
It's definitely a surreal moment. You're like, wait, who is this girl? Where did she come from?
Right, and there's something about her that's just not quite right, especially her eyes.
Oh, yeah. The animation draws attention to her eyes. They're described as being really mature, almost knowing.
Right, like they hold this wisdom or understanding that doesn't seem to match her age.
It immediately makes you think there's something more to her than meets the eye.
Definitely. It's like she's carrying some kind of secret or deeper knowledge.
And she doesn't just show up and leave. She actually asks to come in and talk to Jenny.
Right, and you can tell Jenny's not thrilled about it. She's like, leave me alone. I just want to wallow in my misery.
Well, yeah, she's built up these walls around herself. She's trying to isolate herself from the world.
But there's this urgency in the girl's voice, like she has something important to say, something that can't wait.
And it's interesting because despite her annoyance, Jenny eventually lets the girl in.
I think there's a part of her that's curious, or maybe even recognizes something familiar in the girl.
Yeah, like maybe deep down she senses that this encounter is unavoidable.
But even as she lets her in, there's this description of the girl's gaze making Jenny's apartment feel smaller.
It's like this tiny little space is suddenly being invaded by this powerful presence.
And that sets the stage for this really intense interaction that unfolds between them.
So once they're inside, the girl does something completely unexpected.
She asks for juice.
Which, on the surface seems like a pretty normal thing for a kid to want.
Right, but then she adds these really specific details. She's like, I want the green cup with lots of sugar, please.
And that specificity is what makes it so strange, right?
Absolutely. It's not just any cup. It has to be the green cup, and it has to have lots of sugar.
And for Jenny, this seemingly innocent request triggers a flood of memories.
Yeah, we get this flashback to her childhood where she's stealing sugar to quell her hunger.
It's a really powerful image, this little girl desperate for something sweet.
And it reveals a lot about her past.
Yeah.
This sense of deprivation and neglect.
So the green cup isn't just a cup. It becomes this symbol of that difficult time in her life.
Exactly. It represents a time when her basic needs weren't met, when she had to resort to stealing just to satisfy her hunger.
And it highlights how these seemingly small sensory details, like a specific color or taste,
Can become so deeply embedded in our memories.
right, they can act like triggers transporting us back to those past experiences.
And from this simple request for juice, the conversation takes a really sharp turn.
It becomes much more confrontational.
The girl basically asks Jenny point blank, "Don't you recognize me?"
And Jenny's immediate reaction is denial. She's angry, she's defensive.
She doesn't want to acknowledge this girl or the memories she represents.
Which is understandable, right? She spent years trying to bury this pain.
But the girl doesn't back down. She keeps pushing.
And she throws out these really piercing accusations,
Like, is this all you've become? Have you forgotten everything you promised me?
It's like she's calling Jenny out for abandoning her younger self.
And the girl goes even further. She says, "Look at me, Jenny. It's me. I'm you. And without you, I'm nothing."
It's a heartbreaking statement. This idea that our past selves are so somehow dependent on our present selves.
And there's this heavy silence that follows that statement.
It's like the weight of those words is just hanging in the air.
And then comes this really pivotal moment. The girl lifts her dress to reveal scars, and they're identical to Jenny's scar.
It's a visual confirmation that they're connected somehow, that they share this painful history.
And the animation emphasizes that these scars tell a story of profound neglect and abuse.
They're not just random marks, they're the physical manifestation of the trauma Jenny endured.
And in that moment, all of Jenny's defenses crumble.
The truth is, staring her right in the face, she can't deny it anymore.
It's like the girl is a living embodiment of her past wounds, the parts of herself she's been trying to ignore.
And the transcript describes this flood of emotions that overwhelms Jenny.
Grief, anger, but also this dawning sense of compassion.
Not just for the girl, but for herself as well.
It's like she's finally seeing herself through the eyes of her younger self.
Then the scars become even more symbolic at this point.
They represent the pain of the past, but also the possibility of healing.
It's like they're a reminder that she survived, that she's still here.
And just as this intense exchange reaches its peak, something else happens.
Dawn breaks.
Right? The light starts to filter in through the window, casting these long shadows across the room.
And as the light appears, the girl vanishes.
It's like she was just a figment of the darkness,
Or maybe her purpose was fulfilled. She brought Jenny to this moment of realization, and now she can fade away.
And her final words echo in the silence. She tells Jenny to rise.
It's not just a farewell, it's a challenge,
Like she's saying, don't let the past defeat. You use it to become stronger.
So to sum up this deep dive, we've explored this really powerful animation called Delirium.
And it's given us a lot to think about,
Definitely. It's a story about the lasting impact of childhood experiences, the promises we make to ourselves, and the potential for healing even in the face of trauma.
And the symbols within the story, the green cup, the scars.
They serve as these potent reminders of the things we try to bury, the experiences that shape who we are.
And it leaves us with this final thought.
What about your own unseen history?
Are there experiences or promises you've made to yourself that you've been trying to ignore?
Could there be a dialogue waiting to happen between your present self and your past self?
What are your green cups or your metaphorical scars? And what might happen if you started to listen to them?
It's a powerful question to consider.
Yeah, it might just unlock a deeper understanding of yourself and your own journey.
And maybe even lead to some healing and growth. So that's our deep dive for today.
Thanks for joining us.
See you next time.